Hey, everybody, welcome to this episode of Compassion and Courage Conversations in Healthcare. I'm your host, Marcus Engel, and this is the podcast where we teach compassionate communication, provide perspective, and inspire resilience. Today, I am going to host a new friend, Jennylynde. And Jennylynde, I'm going to ask you to pronounce your full name for me because, as you know, I use a screen reading technology and software. And today I am sure that I would jumble up your name all in my mouth and get it all wrong. So can you tell me your whole name?
Absolutely. We'll blame the AI for not knowing this one. My name is Jennylynde Renteria-Packham, and it is a mouthful.
It is. But thank you for pronouncing that. And Jennylynde, you're a nurse, right? And a coach. And we get to talk a little bit today about your background. So I guess one of my first questions is what brought you to nursing in the first place? You say it was not actually your first career choice, right?
It was not. I was a nursing assistant for a long time, all through high school and college, and really loved working with the elders and the disabled populations in my area. And had thought I'd grown up thinking I was going to be a physician and I was going to go to medical school. And I got through my first pre-med degree and kind of had a little mid-adolescence crisis. I hate to call that a midlife crisis at 20 something, right?
Quarter life crisis.
Quarter life crisis. There we go. Thank you. And really was struggling at the time, and this was quite a long time ago, with how medicine seemed kind of myopic in my experience in long-term care, right? We were fixing things without a lot of vision for what was around it. I had a friend who was in nursing school. We were working together as aides, and she said, "Oh, go to nursing school." And I thought, oh, I don't want to be a nurse. They work so hard, because I saw how hard they work in long-term care. And she convinced me to go ahead and apply, and I was able to get a spot for the next year, which, again, giving away my age because that doesn't happen anymore. And went to nursing school, went right back into long-term care, really loved working at the bedside with our elders and, dementia populations. That's such a unique area to be able to work. And moved up pretty quickly through the ranks, became a director of nursing in long-term care, stayed in that arena for about 15 years between nursing homes, and then moving up to being the director of all the resident services for a campus that had everything from independent living through the memory care and the skilled nursing options. And then as I moved from that to director of quality, because making improvements is where I feel great. I think we can always all get a little bit better as long as we're vertical and ventilated, and I want to take advantage of that and grow in whatever ways I can. So quality felt like a really great fit for me. And kind of fell into coaching just on the sides of the improvement work I was doing, but recognized that it blended my favorite things about working and leading staff, which is helping them to be the best they can be, with that quality improvement, again, of how can we make a situation the best for everybody. Because really what the years have taught me is that when our team is well cared for and working at their optimum, our patients get the absolute best care out of them, right? And so that always made me passionate to want to continue that forward.
So who taught you leadership?
Ooh, great question. I've had a couple of mentors. Early on in my career, I had one. I was an assistant director of nursing for about a year in New Glarus, Wisconsin, which is a tiny little place, very Swiss. And the whole town thinks in that way, which is very resourceful, looking at everything in a way, how can we use it? Can it be reused? How do we save it and leverage it the best? And that director that I worked with there, her name was Jane Phillipson, just an amazing servant leader who really was never afraid to hop in and do anything. And that was what I loved the most out of my leaders when I was an aide and a frontline nurse. So it was very easy to recognize that in her and want to emulate it. And then I had another mentor later on who, again, was just that kind of person who, understanding that, of course, leaders have some other responsibilities to do sometimes that take us away from being able to help out in the immediacy at the bedside. But whenever we can, that doing so really helps our team feel like we're part of the team too, right? And breaks down some of those hierarchical structures so that we can lead and not just manage another group of people.
And so many people, obviously, you have a calling for nursing,
Yeah.
but then long-term care is another calling altogether. And so many long-term care leaders started out like you as a nurse assistant at the bedside, and then worked their way on up. And I love that because so many people see you get that cumulative effect over years of doing the different jobs in an organization. And so hopefully by the time you get into a leadership position, you've learned a few things,
Mm.
right? Hopefully you've learned a few things. So what did you love? What brought you to long-term care?
Ooh. Um, gr- wow, I'm really reaching back in the memory here. I haven't thought about
Mhm.
this for a while, Marcus. Girl Scouts.
Girl
Actually,
Scouts, wow.
I was a Girl
Mhm.
Scout and I was looking for where to do my Gold Award in my high school troop. We had been together all through elementary school and middle school, and by high school, there was just a few of us left. Of course, that's how that works in any youth organization, right? As kids get closer to college, their interests have to narrow a little bit. You can't do everything like you can when you're little. And so there were a few of us looking for a Gold Award location, and I found a nursing home nearby that one of my classmates' family actually ran and said, "Hey, I'd love to come do something," and had always really been close with the elders in my family. I've always been kind of leaning towards closer to the elders than to the kids. And so love to hang out with my grandparents and great grandparents and, grand aunts and uncles and just absolutely enjoyed the time with them. So when that opportunity for volunteering came up through the Gold Award, that's where I first discovered that idea of long term care as an industry and had gone in and worked with the activities folks to put on a multi-week activity program. But really had found, again, grew up thinking I was going to be a physician. So had that
Mhm.
medical bent to the eye through which I was looking at things. And that's where I thought, oh, I could be a nursing assistant here. Wouldn't that be fantastic?
Mhm.
And it sure was. So,
It sounds like it was in you that compassionate caregiver side was in you from an early age.
yeah, my family has always been big into being respectful of our elders and supporting
Mhm.
them and staying with them. And that's been a driver all throughout my life and helped informed a lot of life decisions I made, even to be there and keep my grandmother in her home until she passed. That was something that she really wanted. And it was just such a gift to be able to achieve that for her. Of course, with the help of our friends in palliative care and hospice, because aren't they amazing? Um,
Yes.
as a
Yes.
resource for folks when they're nearing end of life or having discomfort from ongoing diagnoses. And so they were just amazing to help me achieve that for her. And it's something I feel really proud of to be able to say that I was able to keep her home because um, at the end, that was hands on care. She was certainly not in a way, as many people are not, right? Even a peaceful passing usually needs some care. So,
Yeah, yeah, doesn't it? And as you said, shout out to hospice and palliative caregivers. That's that's a calling there too. That's a
right.
special calling too. And long term care, of course,
Mm,
utilizes those services quite closely.
yeah.
So so you've got a long history of being a caregiver. Does I always ask my guests a question that's the same question that I ask my pre-meds every semester, which is to share about a time that someone was there for you or that you were there for someone else. What's a story or a narrative that defines what compassion looks like to you?
I most recently might have been my grandmother,
Mm,
um, and being able to be there for her. She had been was- so the joke in long-term care, right, is we can graduate people off of hospice because when we get that partnership and they bring in all those new fresh eyes, sometimes the improvements in care that they can help us make actually help people live longer, better lives.
mhm.
And that was certainly my experience throughout the years not everyone who goes on hospice comes off, but some people do. And my grandmother had been on for actually almost a couple years. By the time of her passing, her decline was certainly slow, um, but a continued decline. But she had gotten a little bit better after hospice had gotten involved. And so we'd been so lucky. And I was actually out of town when she took her last turn for needing all of that 24-hour hands-on care. And they had reached out to me and said, is this time? Should she go to the inpatient unit? And I had to stop and ask. I said, did she say she wanted to go to the inpatient unit? Because she had been pretty clear all along that she didn't. And they said, no, actually she didn't. She did not agree to it. And I said, well, then if you can stay till I can get there, I'm about 4 hours away. I'll get there. And then we'll, determine what the best next steps are. And again, because of hospice's amazing support and the things like, durable medical equipment in the home, able to get her hospital bed so that she could stay comfortable and, as well cared for as we could possibly provide in the home. Those sorts of things that they were able to do for us, along with the support to keep her there, was the most recent, I feel like, monumental time in my life where I was making lots of choices to move through every single day with as much compassion as possible for someone else in their situation. As you said, I have a long history and lots of stories, but that's the one most recent to me that's still very powerful.
And I'm hearing several different layers there that the compassion that hospice folks showed to you and your grandmother, right? And I was originally thinking that you were going to talk about you being there for her, but it really kind of ended up that hospice was there for you and your family.
Right.
And I'm sorry to hear about her passing. I hope it was as peaceful as could be.
Oh, yes. And at 95, not a tragedy. She lived a wonderful, full life, and it was as good as it could be. It's hard for the rest of us. I think she passed comfortably and peacefully. Those of us left here, we're the ones that have to deal with missing them, right?
Right. And, it's the cost of human love.
It is.
It's the cost of human love. So tell me a little bit more about coaching. What brought you into this realm of coaching other executives, I suppose, and leaders?
Yeah, really, any leader. I certainly have clients who are, in fact, executive leaders. I also have clients who are more mid-level managers. It's the folks who are tired, and what we're tired of in our leadership roles can vary from person to person. But I think at some point we all find ourselves a little wore out, and maybe not treating ourselves with the compassion necessary for successful interactions in the workplace. So I had come into coaching as a part-time position after my grandmother had passed and we had moved, just to having the time, frankly, as well as the desire in a new space. You always want to change things, and paint's not free. So we wanted a little bit more income. Thought, I can do some care coaching part-time. And I was working for a company that did primarily nurses doing care coaching related to what their insurers thought they could use some support on. And as I moved through that, I thought, gosh, there's just a whole wealth of different areas where someone could coach, and had some advice from other folks was that, sure, you're a nurse and we could fall back on healthcare coaching. And why wouldn't you want to leverage those decades of leadership experience and share that with other leaders? Because there's a lot less of that out there on a personal one-to-one basis. There's some amazing leadership programs that exist that support folks through learning different leadership theory or things they might want to implement. Not as much of the, one-on-one support and asking tough questions, right? Sometimes as leaders, we need someone to sit us down and ask us, is this going the way you thought it was going to go? And if it's not, maybe what's the barrier? How could we fix that? How do we move it forward better? And so that it's not quite a mentorship, but it's similar to that in that I am coming from a place of experience and having had some really interesting experiences over the years there too, with different teams or leaders that were or were not um, the most supportive to the success of the organization moving
Sure.
forward. So yeah, so it drew me in. And then when I had the opportunity to do it full time, I thought, I absolutely want to focus on this. I love that experience because I love watching a leader come to their own conclusion because I don't know what's going to be the best for them when we enter into a session. I don't know where it's going to go. I absolutely am a huge fan of following wherever people lead us, right? A very
Mm-hmm.
Montessori. We do it with kids,
Mm-hmm.
we do it with our elders with dementia, and frankly, we can do it with everybody, which is letting the other person with the needs lead where the work's going to go. And people just go in amazing places. And I get to ride along with them on that journey and see that excitement come back into their eyes. Because, like I said, sometimes we're tired.
Yeah.
We need somebody to encourage us to advocate for ourselves. So that's what drew me in.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. And you're doing work that you love, no doubt about it. But how many times are those who work in long-term care, you're working an 8-hour day? That's tough, right?
Mm,
You're on your feet a lot. You are moving patients a lot. You are probably not sitting down very often in an 8-hour shift. And then you come home with all the responsibilities of home. Maybe you have an elderly parent or a grandparent, just like what you were describing with your grandmother. And we're in that sandwich generation. So any kind of support that we can give to those at the bedside, especially like you said, mid-level managers, right?
right.
I I often hear that the nurse manager position is the hardest position in a hospital. Would the manager position in a nursing home equate to that? Is that the hardest job in a long-term care facility?
Yes, although probably more the charge nurse.
Hmm.
Um, Unfortunately, a lot of places in long term care don't have necessarily nurse managers that are equal to the nurse manager in the hospital setting, right? The nurse
Hmm.
manager in a hospital setting overlooking a unit or a set of units, usually, and all the staff that goes under it. Um, Unfortunately, I think a lot of times in long term care, there simply isn't the depth there of
Right.
leadership support, and there certainly isn't the finances to maintain those intermediary positions in some places. So yeah, or it ends up being like a director of nursing and an assistant director of nursing, and maybe one manager, and they're overseeing the entire facility. And yeah, it's a
It's
lot.
tough. It's tough.
It's,
Yeah, no matter what your position is in long-term care, it's tough, but it's a calling too.
oh sure.
But still, as leaders, I think our job is to assess and observe those staff members who might be lagging a bit because they're taking on too much, and how do we support them, whether it's something as formal as coaching or just that tap on the shoulder saying, hey, I'm here, right?
Yeah, I had a recent experience of being in a refresher for motivational interviewing
Mhm.
techniques because that is where I fall with how I like to approach things. Really a fan of ORS. And someone challenged me about affirmations and how powerful they are when we use them thoughtfully as leaders. And it was such a great reminder because sometimes I was the cheerleader. Thank you so much for coming to work today. We're really glad you're here. And going through that refresher course and realizing, yeah, that's fine. It is supportive. And if I could take an extra 15 seconds and really recognize, gosh, Jane, CNA Jane, you did such an amazing job getting Mr. Smith to take his pills, to eat his dinner, to take that liquid in today. I really saw your efforts there, right? We can use, and again, what is that? Just a few more seconds other than the great job, glad you were here today. And
Personalizing it.
yeah, and leaders get busy too, right? This is that other
Sure.
place where I think coaching can be helpful, or mentorship, or even, nowadays there's a million and one places online where we can find peer groups to talk through things, but helping hold us accountable as leaders to those best practices that are really powerful as we're moving through, whether it's dealing with a complaint, or dealing with our friends from the Joint Commission, or dealing with a state regulatory agency, or our own staff. All of those places, there are little tweaks we can make to really leverage a best practice that's going to help that interaction stick with that person and just keep them as dedicated as possible for as long as possible to that work that they're doing. Because again, my belief, if we can get everybody rowing in the same direction and really committed to their work, our patients are going to see the best possible care we can give them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When you're talking about the affirming staff, it makes me think of, gosh, I believe it was in the 1 Minute Manager where they talked about making sure that compliments are written down and critiques are only verbalized.
Ooh, I like that.
And I've always thought of that too, that when, as much as if we can take another 15 seconds, so now you're spending a grand total of 30 seconds of your day personalizing and writing it down and signing it, that that goes a long way too with helping staff feel acknowledged and noticed and again affirmed. I think that's a great word to use. Yeah.
All those boards we can see, right? I love when we can go into a unit or go into a long-term facility and there is the kudos board or the reward board, and it's those written compliments of folks who did a good job. It is such a powerful motivator, both for continuing to do good work, and it refreshes our commitment to that organization, because that's another thing we're facing, right? Not enough people everywhere in healthcare. It's hard to get enough staff. So what can we do to help our staff really know their value where we're at? So yeah, I love those.
That's what you're doing. Good stuff. Good stuff. Where do people find out more about you?
Yeah. If someone wants, one of the things that I think is really important about potential coaching is you got to know how I coach. And although this is maybe a little sample of how I speak, I prefer to do a complimentary coaching session with folks right off the bat, just to dive right in. We're going to get in both feet in the deep end, see what your barriers are, what I can help you work through, hopefully get to the end of a session with another goal that'll get you towards your vision, some little steps that you can be successful at, because I'm also a huge fan of a SMART goal and it's got to be achievable. So to do that, you go to book.couragecoaching.us, because I am couragecoaching.us. And you can book that complimentary session there and just answer a couple questions about what you're facing to help me be really ready to work with you. And then pick your time and we'll meet. And if you like it and you want to continue, we can talk further, but it's certainly not for that. It's to get that coaching experience out there to as many leaders as want it, so that they can continue to serve their teams who serve our patients.
Yeah. Yeah. And coaching is a relationship that you've got to click.
Yep.
Right. You
Yep.
can't have huge obstacles between client and coach, or else things just don't work. So
Right.
I'm glad you're putting that out there. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I guess my last question for you, yeah, I'm so excited to learn more about you and get to know you a little bit. But my last question for you today is one I often ask on the podcast, and that is, if you had the world's tallest billboard on the world's highest mountain, what is the message that you would like to broadcast to humanity?
Mm, I I can't be original on this one. I'm going to have to go with treat other people the way you want to be treated.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not rocket science, right? Just being human.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Jennylynde, thank you so much for your time today, and good luck to you. And
Thank you.
please know if there's anything I can do to serve you, I'm always here.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much for having me. It's been a joy.
Certainly. And listeners, thank you all for being part of this episode of Compassion and Courage, Conversations in Healthcare. I'm your host, Marcus Engel. I'm a professional keynote speaker, healthcare consultant, author, and podcaster. Please visit marcusengel.com for any of those needs. And we will see you all on the next episode of Compassion and Courage.